Testing. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Smith post-editing. The episode's already, but we realized we forgot to make a brief announcement, so I'll just give that to you here real quick, which is that if you didn't make it to our Fortichka pop-up with all the Russian fashion that we did at the beginning of December in New York City, you are in luck. We're selling off the remainder of the inventory on Instagram over the next couple of months. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, go ahead and do that now. I think our username is Fortichka_. If you don't have Instagram, you can just look at it on the web, like on the Instagram web thing, and be like, oh, I like that. And then if you want to email us at she'sinrussia@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter. I opened those this morning, so you can do that. So keep your eyes peeled. If you missed it, you might not be out of luck. All right, so back to the actual show. You're going to hear Lily going to a Stolovaya.
Можно, пожалуйста, салат витамины и сырники можно?
Сырники можно?
Да. Еще черный чай, пожалуйста.
Так. Сырники, витамины, черный чай с сахаром?
Да.
Все? 143. Наставляется. 143. Подносик берите, присаживайтесь, сырники принесите.
Спасибо.
This shit feel like I won't ever make it home. Traffic's backed up, I got to get off of this road.
From St. Petersburg and Brooklyn. This is She's in Russia. I'm Lilette. And I'm Smith. Yes. Yes, I am a Smith. And I'm a Lilette. Okay, this is a She's in Italia. She's in Italia. Italia. She is spaghetti and I'm meatball. We know which one's which. All right. Why don't you tell me what I'm going to tell you about? Okay. You're going to tell me about the Stolovayas. What's the plural for Stolovaya in Russian? Stolovaya. Yeah. Ugh. Okay. Let's not say that. Okay.
Honestly, I'll probably just say Stolovayas with an S because I like it better.
Yep. I'm like the history of the Stolovaya in
maybe
Russia. Tell a person what it is. Tell a body.
That's a good idea. Okay. You're really on to something there, Smith.
So the concept of a Stolovaya is pretty much a Soviet phenomenon, and it's like a cafeteria, self-service, at least in like its current and latest form. Well, it's not self-service. Self-service. Some of it is, but then sometimes the lady spoons. Oh, okay. Sorry, what is that called? Not self-service, but like when you. It's like a combo, like a buffet. Though. Like when you go through and like. Yeah, but somebody not a self-service buffet. Yeah. So let me start over. A Stolovaya is like a cafeteria where you get food on a tray and you go like a school cafeteria. Somebody like serves you food from behind glass. You know, sometimes it's self-service because like you can take a few things yourself, like maybe it's like salads or a bun, and it's like a limited selection of, particularly in Russia, it's like Soviet/Russian food and very cheap. That's the idea. So Stolovaya, it's actually the word for dining room, and the word stol is table. Okay, wait. So would you say, like, would you refer to the dining room in your house as a Stolovaya? Yeah, if you had one, which you would be not
Right.
I mean, it's very uncommon to have a separate dining room.
If you're like a straight up aristocrat.
Yeah, dining rooms are bourgeois trash. Extra room with that some like 7 people could sleep in. You just have a huge table there. It's like we could get bunks on each wall. But actually, like, especially, I mean, yeah, the way Soviet apartments are laid out, Soviet and post-Soviet, is like mostly there are just bedrooms and a kitchen, and there's no common space like a living room or a dining room other than the kitchen. And like especially, so in a communal apartment, then you just have, you know, like a family in a communal apartment, you know, of whatever, 2 to however many people, depending on how many kids are, lives in a room and then like shares the kitchen with everyone else in the apartment, and then that's it. There's no like living room. But wait,
sorry, this is a kind of sidetrack, but what is the layout of those new suburb towers? Do they not have a living room either?
I doubt they do. It's like most people, this is the confusing thing when you're like a foreigner and you come to Russia and you're like looking at like renting an apartment and real estate in general. It's like, remember this, like a 2-bedroom? Yeah. It's really, it's a 2-room apartment. That's what that means. It's like, I mean, sometimes it says bedroom, but basically like my apartment is a 1-bedroom. That means it has one room for the bedroom and a kitchen and a bathroom. I mean, that is a 1-bedroom. But like you guys have a living room, for example. That
we have a living room.
Could definitely be like a 3rd bedroom in Russia. It would 100% be. I mean, it's a walkthrough, but it would be laid out differently. But anyway, yeah. So the thing about Stolovaya is like when we talk about them, we are talking about something that is like particularly Soviet-born, at least this like typical manifestation of a Stolovaya. One thing that I think like is hard to remember or like imagine is just that like there was just a huge variety of places to eat, like public places to eat during the Soviet era and pre-Soviet, but like pre-Soviet we're talking about different things. We're talking about like taverns and pubs and like restaurants that are expensive and stuff. And then in the Soviet era, there's still like a large variety, but like different types. So there's Stolovaya. There's like beer stands. That would be just like a place where you sort of like line up and there's like a bar outside and you don't really stay there. There's no seats. A pelmenaya, which is like a place where you get pelmeni. You know what that is? A zakusichnaya, which is like a place where you get snacks, and it's often sort of like hybrid together with a rumenchnaya, which is the vodka house, which also has snacks. Pishichnaya, which is a place where you get fried dough that's like sort of the equivalent of donuts, but donuts are becoming a thing now in Russia, but like they weren't before, so it's just like more like beignet. It's like fried dough with like powdered sugar. And then you have cafes, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's like a sort of between a Stolovaya and a restaurant, and then you have a restaurant, which is like fancy. There's more pirozhkovi, which is like where you would get piragi, the pies.
God, everything's so specialized.
Yeah, so there's like this specialization, which I think is really nice. It's just like, you know, I get this thing at that place, and there still are. I've definitely seen like Pushchny and Stolovayas you see all the time, like contemporary Petersburg, Moscow, like many. Like I recently saw one on Nevsky, and so I think that kind of thing is like sort of like a returned in the form of a kind of kitsch. New age. Yeah, it's not even kitschy. It's like doesn't look Soviet aesthetically, but it's like this is sort of using nostalgia to like harken back to this thing that existed where you could only get from any, but it's like in the sort of new style where everything's clean. Right,
it's
and
like how
minimal.
There's like a general store in Bed-Stuy, but it's like 2 young white hip girls that run it. And
oh my god,
overalls and sell mason jars.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
To give you some background of what sort of happened when like right after the revolution, the Soviet Union is sort of like all the organizations and ministries and like the systems of the Soviet Union are just sort of coming into being in the, you know, late teens, early 20s. And one of the biggest problems is food, or just like something that needs to be solved and organized. It's like, how do we feed the workers? And this concept that workers and students and just everyone, like Soviet citizens, need to be provided with food at least during the day is like sort of an immediate decision. And the way that like manifests is in basically cafeteria type places, like Stolovayas, in a factory, in a school, which we have also, in like institute, whatever. So basically in any kind of established or institution, enterprise. The sort of like basic goal of a Stolovaya is to serve a 3-course, so like you get like a salad, a main course, and then a dessert for during the day for lunch. Like there are Stolovayas that are open for other meals, but it's more like that's like the main goal is to like cover during the day. But I think honestly, in schools like a lot of times they were 3 meals or something. You know, it was like kids definitely ate in Soviet schools like really, really well compared to my like single wheat cracker and cup of juice, which is my snack. But then
are you talking about Waldorf? Or are you talking about Masters?
No, Blue Rock. But that was our snack. But then you were supposed to bring lunch, like everybody packed lunch. Like,
yeah, that's kind of fucked up. It's like I'm paying to be here, and you're not going to feed me.
Yeah, Masters fed us like very nicely, but yeah. I mean, Blue Rock. I don't know. And then I would be like, all I want in life is a Lunchables, and I would never be allowed to have it.
Have you ever had a Lunchable?
I mean, I think my mom maybe let me have one once, or like I tried one of those like the pieces of bologna rubber from a friend. I mean, they're horrible.
They're obviously horrible, but I really don't like that. Like now it would be objectively horrible and I wouldn't enjoy eating it, but there's a time in my life when I would have enjoyed eating it. And it's sad that I never got to experience that.
You hear that, Mom?
Eating a Lunchable. Yeah. Let your uber healthy kid eat a Lunchable one time.
Back to the USSR a little bit. So a couple of things are happening in the early 1920s. There is the start of the new economic policy, NEP. Do you know what that is?
Isn't it just like a series of different public works projects?
No, it's more like a planned temporary economic policy or situation in which there was supposed to be sort of like more free market and more capitalism that was like
I did not know that.
Subject to state control. So basically what that meant was that private individuals were allowed to own their small enterprises and including food ones, and they paid taxes, like very high taxes to do that.
Because the state realized like it didn't have the resources to just immediately take over all production.
Yeah, essentially it was Lenin's like idea to sort of like more slowly transition towards the bright future of communism. And and the people who did that, the people who made their own businesses, opened restaurants or whatever, were like referred to as net men or net women, and they were like the nouveau riche of that time. They were like eventually, and Stalin got rid of that pretty quick in 1928. Nipped that one in the
blight the bright future of communism.
Yeah, he was like, fuck that, too much capitalism. But basically what happened was there had been the NEP system kind of made a little bit of like competition for what had been set up as like public cafeterias and restaurants
that were mostly in institutions.
Yeah. And then in 1923, so all the reading I did about the history of the Stolovaya, history of like public collective food or whatever in the Soviet Union, referred to this moment in 1923, so just a few years into the NEP time, a bunch of like various government organizations create this sort of body called Narodное питание, NARPIT, because Soviets like to shorten things. It sounds so bad in English.
It does.
NARPIT, narwhal, NARPIT, and that like organization whatever was made to basically. It was like a leveling up of the socialization of food in the sense of creating an ideology, creating theory, like getting professional, dietitians, whatever, to like figure out what actually is the best food for somebody to eat. And they went nuts about that. And like, as you might imagine, sort of the way, the decision in terms of like what the Soviet person should eat was became very scientific and very like rigid and kind of pedantic. At some point, the like rations or whatever, or the ideal type of food was broken down by like type of person and also not type of person, like age and also profession.
Okay.
And it was like
profession. That's
yeah,
funny.
and there was like a assigned amount of calories for each profession. Like for example, accountants and librarians, 2,400 calories a day. Teachers, 2,800. Male people, 3,200. Damn,
Okay.
a lot of walking. And like hard labor, construction workers and stuff, 4,000 calories.
Whoa.
Yeah. That was broken down even in more detail in terms of like what exact foods are best to be served and stuff like that.
It's pretty cool. That kind of stuff feels, that feels really advanced to me or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's scientific. I mean, even if it's kind of silly, it's like,
yeah.
there were people who like that was what they do, and then they put together like a book that's like
Right, and that it was a concerted effort across a civilization. That just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess people know better, right? But it just doesn't feel like that happens really anymore.
I mean, yeah, it's also hard to imagine, like it's such a specific situation in which you could then implement that. Mm-hmm. And so, like in 1928, a book is published called something like Grocery or Product Norms for Lunch, Separate Dishes, and Other Products of Public Cafeterias. So it's just like a bunch of standardized information. So it's easier, sort of what I mean by being like easy to implement is just that like, especially in the concept of having a cafeteria in like a particular factory or a particular workplace, you know, you like know the type of people who work there and it's easier to provide specifically for them.
One thing that I feel like I came across this in the very little that there was in English on Stolovaya, but the whole concept of having the place you eat also in the place you work is something that's definitely still used today because it's really efficient and it incentivizes you to work at that place because you're being fed good food.
Yeah, and
it's a little fucked up in modern times, I feel like, because I don't know. It gets used really heavily in like tech companies for sure, where they just like want their young workers to work all the time and not like leave for an actual full hour during lunch. They just want you to like stuff your face in the cafeteria and go back to your computer.
Yeah, and like it's part of the sort of like paternalistic or maternalistic, whatever, relationship between like the worker and the employer.
Maternalistic.
What?
It's not something that people say, I don't think.
Maternalistic?
Not in that context, no.
Because it has to be paternal. Pater.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. You know your dad's not the one feeding you.
Yeah, I know, it's true. But paternalistic, I feel like, is always used in the setting where it's like a negative connotation where something is being demanded of your life, and maternalistic is used
warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
I mean, but you get what I'm saying. Like this sort of control of your personal time and space. And yeah, it's a good comparison. I think like just early Soviet ideology, we've talked about this when we talked about like the what was it, motherhood, or was it the mother episode where we talked about like abortion laws and stuff in the early what I always like to remind people of is that early Soviet ideology and implementation of that ideology like is different from the rest of the time, and it wasn't like always stable and the same, but there was definitely like a charge of like we're actually going to do this and like build a new society from scratch, and that's a intense thing to imagine. So even
it is an intense thing to imagine, and I feel like oftentimes in those settings where like we're going to build a new thing, like nobody actually even tries. So
I'm not saying everyone was like super excited about it, but the real things like actually were built. For example, this thing called a factory kitchen. It was just like a centralization of food production and processing that supplied something like a communal dining room, like a Stolovaya basically, but not exactly a Stolovaya, a massive cafeteria. Or you could like purchase food there. The first one appears in 1925 in a city that's today called Ivanova, which is outside of Moscow, which is interesting to me because it's just interesting that it wasn't in Moscow or Petersburg. These factory kitchens, so they employed a bunch of people they were built specifically in this like constructivist style, which is really cool because it's like a very particular Soviet architectural style that like is, I feel like it like had a short-lived moment or something. Like it's kind of rare. I don't know. I'll send you. Gray, blocky.
Whoa, yeah.
And like, see, it says Stolovaya on one side.
It looks like a government building for sure.
Yeah, and you can see how so basically you can see there's different levels. There's a lot of windows. And one of the things like that this group that I mentioned, this like NARPIT, and one of their ideological claims is like people need to not only eat healthy food that, you know, keeps them strong and lets them work harder or whatever, but they also need to have a relaxing and like aesthetically pleasant environment in which to eat that sort of like lets them psychologically rest from whatever work they were doing. So something like this giant factory kitchen would have like maybe one floor is it's not exactly a Stolovaya in the sense of the buffet thing. I think it probably is slightly differently laid out, but it looks like just a big dining hall. And then another floor would have like, you know, rest rooms or something where you just like sit and there's like music and plants. I don't know. And that is, but they're big and like window filled and, you know, light. That's like the philosophy sort of like coming through in the architecture. So this is like a phenomenon of the early era. And then basically we have like the war, as always.
Oh, one other fact that I came across was that also these communal kitchens and Stolovayas were like a really good way to decrease the responsibility of domestic duties on women.
Yeah. So, right. So I didn't mention that, one of the main like philosophies of right away, like Lenin, etc., of having communal food is freeing up women's labor. Like it's basically being, you know, the whole like kitchen, to work in the factory and get paid and be like a citizen contributing to society rather than to domestic comfort. So yeah, like this is the 20s and 30s are when we see a lot of posters and like propaganda talking about freeing women from kitchen slavery, as it's called, like, and lots of sort of calls to arms, you know, like throw down the pots and pans and like
pick up the anvil,
pick up the factory. And yeah, and it's like that's very much a part of the, again, early Soviet mentality is like we need to completely break down the bourgeois tradition of a family and like of home life basically, and bring everything sort of out into public where people are, where you're interacting with your fellow comrades all together in like more group things.
My nightmare.
Yeah,
you get to hang out with your coworkers all the time now.
Yeah.
Yay.
They're not just your coworkers, they're your comrades. And then also remember this with like the kids thing about like wanting to free women from childcare, also having like this concept of also, you know, like we need to train children to be like true Soviet citizens, and like the parents don't know what they're doing. Like they should be trained by a caretaker who knows, you know, ideologically, who's red marks and stuff.
And that worked out real well. I wonder if there was ever a concerted effort to release women from childbirth as well. Like, you think the early Soviet government was looking into how to grow people in petri dishes?
I mean, that doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility at all.
It doesn't, no.
Well, it's the same thing with food, basically. It was like, you don't know what's nutritious for you and like what's the best thing for you. We have, you know, scientists and doctors and nutritionists studying this stuff. They should prepare the menu for you,
right,
and provide the food. Like, you shouldn't be like, why would you handle that? You don't know what you're doing. It's like,
which like in theory might be right. It's just like that kind of dogmatic approach to literally everything is when things get fucked up.
Well, yeah, and it's just like constant state intervention and constant. I mean, the thing is that the reality is that people still ate at home a lot. I mean, like, maybe not lunch, but like most people didn't, you know, fully buy into this like utopia, and the utopia wasn't necessarily, of course it didn't work right away. And like a lot of times, like in cafeterias or in whatever, any any kind of like public food place, there would be shortages of stuff, or like there was corruption. Maybe people who work there were like stealing some, there was some good meat came through. People who worked at the Stolovaya maybe stole it and then take home and then like, put in more like bread in the like hamburger or whatever. Yeah. So it's like nothing, of course it wasn't like everything was perfect and working all the time.
Okay, let's talk about the war.
Okay, well, it's not, don't exactly have anything to say in the war. The war just is always like a marker. Okay, so what's interesting is apparently the Stolovaya as we know it, rumor has it, that exists in contemporary Russia, that is this like sort of like hybrid of self-service and, canteen style, cafeteria style, where someone's serving you from behind glass. That, as I suspected, actually apparently did come from America.
Oh,
as I suspected, out of the blue. So let's watch her show.
Oh, okay, all right. Wait. Sorry, explain. So post-war, that's when this like hybrid thing becomes a thing.
That's what I was understanding, because it wasn't like really clear. I'm sure I'm not sure, but I think that there was something more like a server in the early years, because maybe not taking your order, but maybe bringing out stuff, just because of this like this video we're about to watch, which I read in a couple of places. Maybe it's a myth, but that's what I read. Let's watch it.
Okay.
When the American government, they tried to find out who want to host Khrushchev. It was the president of IBM company, Tom Watson, who told, yes, I want to show him my achievement, I will host it him. And he was touring him around this factory, showing the production of the computers. So my father looked around this and he thought, he told, yes, we also have computers. Maybe even better than yours. For him, most interesting was not the production of the computers, but the cafeteria, because it was self-service, and we didn't have this invention in the Soviet Union. Here you see this very clean plastic tables, and you yourself bringing tray and there. So he told, oh, I like it. And he returned to Moscow and gave order, do the same as Americans doing. You have to copy that and do self-service in our cafeteria, in our plants.
Wow, that was an excellent clip.
Thank you.
Spot on.
Yeah, isn't that crazy that I also just thought of it at the last second? I was like, wait, this might exist. And it did.
Yeah, wow, that's nice. This is part of a whole thing, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't look into it. I was too busy.
Cold War Roadshow.
Oh, yeah. Khrushchev, yes. It's a whole thing when Khrushchev visited the U.S. I think it was in 1959. And he went to all the shows of, like, all the new, kitchen appliances where they're, like, shown in a place, where, like, ladies are showing you how to use them. He went to, like, IBM, saw their factory, and, like, saw their cafeteria, which he got really excited about. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying, like, I'm not exactly sure what the form was in the kitchen factories of service, but it sounds like it wasn't self-serve and it wasn't, hold a tray. It was like you sit at a table and somebody brings you out something really fast, like
according to Khrushchev's son.
I mean, that's not the only person though. I read that in like multiple places that like that model was from the IBM cafeteria.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So like,
wow, that's so rare when something's so traceable like that.
I mean, it also seems strange that like, it's because that is the way Stolovaya's work now, and it does seem strange that it would have started as late as like 1960. But apparently that is what happened. So like, basically, Khrushchev's goal was to automatize, to make the process of, getting food,
automate
it and to make it like as humanless as possible. So ideally he wanted there to be no like hybrid. Ideally he wanted you to just like either you pick it yourself and then like, you know, you put the tray back yourself and then like a dishwasher machine washes it and like even machines in the 80s there was a Stolovaya like this. I think it was in the 80s. That was like the fulfillment of Khrushchev's dream, but he was already not the head of the state anymore. But like it was like somehow machines served the food also, which is gross.
I hate that shit.
Yeah, it's fucked up. But
The furthest I'm willing to go is that conveyor belt where you put the dishes on the belt.
I mean, we're getting into that right now with our like iPad ordering.
No. I'm against that.
I am too, but we're getting into it.
I know,
America.
it sucks. Like those Japanese ones where you like order and then it comes out of a box and you don't see a single soul.
Yeah, it's gross. I agree. But yeah, so this like making it automated, making it more efficient, making it so that and also he was like really excited about the fact that he didn't wait in line because he just sort of went along like, yeah, there's like a line, but people are just moving along with their tray. And that was like, great.
Yeah. I also enjoy the cafeteria experience. I'm on board with this.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to like see the selection of food and be like that, and that.
And that and that. And that. The selection, you mean all the things you're going to put on your plate.
Yeah. Oh, damn. I forgot to mention this guy. Maybe hold on. He's just a funny thing to mention. Let me just check his name. Manuel Isakovich Bevzner. He was one of the organizers of the Institute of Food, of Nutrition in Moscow. So just to go back a little bit, just because like he has really specific ideologies about food. He was one of the people who was like very vocal in the 30s, etc., 40s about food being like food for the proletariat is not. First of all, it doesn't have to be like yummy. It's like more important that it's nutritious and filling, and that he also specifically wanted the food to be bland, because he said if it was spicy or like peppery or anything that's like too sharp or flavorful, according to him, was like too exciting. Like it excited your senses too much.
And like the little like pleb brain would get overwhelmed.
Or I think he just wanted people to he didn't want people to, you know, have some kind of emotional, more like he wanted food to just be like calming, like bland, and calming was the word that was used. Like things also shouldn't be fried. They shouldn't be fried. They shouldn't be spicy. They should just be like either boiled or like baked, and just like you know, soft and calm.
This guy would have loved Soylent.
Yeah,
he would have been like, yes.
And so this is where we get like a lot of Soviet Russian food is like that. You know, you have mashed potatoes. You have this like the kotlety, which are like kind of like hamburgers, but they have, you know, you can do them out of different kinds of meat. It's ground up, and then it has like maybe like onions and bread in it also. Mm-hmm. Everything's sort of like subdued. And like, not that he thought of everything, but that was definitely his philosophy, and I think it just like explains a lot. Let's get into some foods that you would find in a Stolovaya. So that's fun. So, I mean, tasty. At different times, like, different things. But as I said, there's sort of this, like, standard of having, like, a 3-course lunch. And that would be, the first course is going to be a salad or a soup. Well, you remember what the salads are. Like, the sort of most basic one would be something like grated carrot or grated cabbage or...
beets?
Yeah, beets, and then like, you know, mayonnaise on it or something. Or like finely chopped vegetables, like a vinaigrette salad in Russia is like chopped potatoes, very small pieces of potato, beet, probably onion, and missing something important, peas.
Okay.
With like...
Not really a salad, but okay.
Yeah, but that's what, like, Russian salads are just like finely chopped ingredients with like some kind of sauce that's generally mayonnaise. And then, I mean, then you get like, there's like the classic like New Year's salads. And nowadays they definitely are served in Stolovayas, something like Olivier or
what?
Do you know what's literally translated as herring under a fur coat?
No.
It's selёdka под шубой. It's selёdka, which is like pickled herring, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And then like I forget what it is. It's like 3 layers of like I guess onion, and then the shuba, the fur coat, I guess, is a bunch of beets, but like mixed with mayonnaise, like shredded. And that maybe that 3 layers like that.
And is it considered, that's a salad? It's not baked or anything?
It is considered, it's a salad. It's cold. And I mean, it's a lot. Like, it doesn't taste bad, but it's just like so rich because it's just like mayonnaise and like fish and onion and beets. And I was like, I have had like one bite and been like, okay, every time. Like, I can't have a full portion of that. It's just like, it's a lot. Okay, so that was salad. And then something very plain for the main course. It could just be like kotlety with maybe some mashed potatoes or some kind of fish, maybe like baked or something. A lot of times now you get like things like fish or meat are just like, for some reason they have like melted cheese on them. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, I had that once.
With like kind of mayonnaise in it too.
Yeah, it's like kind of gross.
Yeah. And then like the sides, you know, grechka, potatoes, rice, some kind of grain.
Okay.
Or starch. And then like the classic Stolovaya dessert is a drink, like kompot, which is made from dried fruit.
But it's not viscous, right? It's like
it's liquid.
Completely liquid.
Yeah. And you just drink it.
Okay.
But like nowadays there's like cakes and stuff.
Yeah.
Cake. And like little pirashki, little buns with stuff in them. Mm-hmm. At this point, like modern day ones have just like, I think, a really large selection. I think the selection is larger than it was, you know?
Yeah, but still in the vein of things you've described, for sure.
Yeah. There's always a meat, but at some point they made a fish day to deal, basically because there was like a shortage of good meat. There was sort of like, at some point it was instituted that Thursdays are fish days. So you always eat fish on Thursdays, which seems like religious to me or something. But
it does, yeah. Wait, isn't there a fish thing on
Fridays?
Friday? Yeah, Fish Friday.
Something like that.
I don't know.
Showing
Jesus likes fish.
Showing our ignorance. Jesus likes fish.
We don't know. I feel like also you're failing to remark on one of the greatest things about Stolovaya.
I said they were cheap.
But
how cheap are they?
Cheap.
Okay, yeah, why don't you talk about that?
So, I mean, I can't remember the exact price, but I have a distinct memory of us going and, you know, being our usual glutton selves and getting whatever we wanted, and it being like maybe in total $5, maybe.
Yeah.
Something around there.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like, yeah.
Multiple, like, soup and salad and buns and, like, a main dish and a grain and a dessert and a juice. And each of us got that, and it was, like, $5.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can definitely eat for, like, a few dollars.
Yeah, and if you're careful, you could, like, be healthy at a Stolovaya. It's not fast food by any means.
Yeah.
In that traditional sense.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction, because that was, I think, important for, like, it never was supposed to be like that. It was always supposed to be healthy, even if the ingredients were, you know, wanting. The idea wasn't to make like a burger and fries. It was like to make like home cooked food.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And they succeeded.
Yeah. I just want to talk about restaurants for a second, and then I think let me just check. Yeah, because we've talked about the fact that people did eat at home anyway. I mean, because, there were, like, I think there were more extreme things, like, you know, apartments being built without kitchens at some point. But then, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's more radical. But then, like, Hrushevki, more and more people started getting their own apartment in the 60s and onwards, rather than living in communal apartments, etc. But they still, you know, they have a kitchen, and I think a lot of people are eating at home a lot of the time. And then there's always, like, you know, there's all of the kitchen culture, which we'll talk about another time, and like holiday culture where, you know, you have, even in a tiny apartment, like everyone comes and like sits at a long table somehow and just like eats a lot. Like those things are important throughout the Soviet era. And the like most typical sort of nostalgic versions of them seem to come from post-war time, when you sort of get a little bit more of a, more people have more privacy.
Boom.
Yeah, and like those are the times when you, like, movies coming out from those times show that sort of like family sitting around the table more, and that sort of comes back into like the value system.
Yeah, I wonder, you think that was in part like a response to the war?
Like wanting to have more kids? Probably.
Well, yeah, wanting to have more kids and just feeling that, like, if your brother or son or whoever, like, goes off and fights in the war, like, that's a really distinct feeling of loss that's tied to the family. It doesn't feel public.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, like, I feel like that's what happened in America also. Like, people really hunkered down, and, like, security became a really big part of, like, you know, like, fencing off your yard and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's a good
internalizing.
Point. I mean,
atomizing.
But like, and so some of it is driven from people, and some of it's driven from, a lot of it's driven from the government. But like,
yeah, I guess the design, the architecture too, is
suburbs and stuff. But I mean, yeah, as you know, in Russia that didn't happen.
Yeah, no suburbs.
Not like that. Isolated.
Yeah.
And for ideological reasons. Did you pick a it's interesting that I wanted to talk about envy, because I read in multiple articles people referenced that. They're like, in his novel Envy, Yuri Alesha talks about a net man.
Oh, all right, nice. Okay, do you want to properly introduce the book? And then I picked one. I mean, I didn't get that far in.
It's pretty early on, the like parts where he talks about. I don't know what you're gonna read.
I've selected a passage, but why don't you introduce the book as a whole, and then I can read the passage.
There is a novella called Envy, or Zavist, written by Soviet writer Yuri Alesha, and it was published in 1927 in a journal. I highly recommend it, and we're going to read an excerpt from it. It's this like surreal, sort of grotesque, surreal narrative about the narrator is like living in the apartment of one of those. Well, I'm not sure if he's a net man, but
He's not
like
a
net man.
He's in the government, yeah. Okay. But he is planning a very cheap cafeteria.
Yeah, so he lives in, the narrator, like, you're dropped right into a scene where the narrator is in the apartment of this guy who is like one of those ideologically driven men who is trying to like build, you know, the biggest kitchen ever or whatever, and like,
right. What is a bit, like, he wants to call it 2 bits? Is a bit a ruble? Like, is that a familiar thing to you? He keeps saying like, oh no, it'll only cost 2 bits.
Well, it's not a ruble. Maybe a kopeck.
Okay.
I don't know, because a ruble is a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a ruble. That's so a salary was like 100 or 150 rubles a month.
Well, then that can't be. It must mean something different then.
In any case, yeah, I feel like I remember talking about that, the translation as being bit, and I can't remember. But yeah. You want to read?
So this particular passage I've chosen is about a sausage. So the premise here is that the guy is this like government minister or whatever he is he's like
the director
to
of food production, whatever, at some
is
factory.
trying to like develop meals, new types of meals that are really cheap and also nutrient rich. Imagine an ordinary tea sausage, a fat, perfectly round slice cut from the beginning of a hefty chunk. At its blind end, from the wrinkled casing tied in a knot, hangs a string tail. It's just a sausage. Weight probably a little more than a kilo. A sweating surface, yellowish dots of under the casting fat. Where it's cut, the same fat looks like white specks. Babichev was holding the sausage in his hand. He was talking. Doors were opening. People were coming in. It was getting crowded. The sausage was resting in Babichev's raised pink hand like something alive. Great, isn't it? He inquired, addressing everyone at once. No, you have to look. Too bad Shapiro's not here. We have to call Shapiro. Ho ho, great, you called Shapiro? It's busy, call again. Then the sausage was on the table. Babichev lovingly arranged its bedding, moving back and not taking his eye off it. He sat down in his armchair. He found it with his backside, dug his fists into the arms, and burst out laughing. He raised a fist, saw the grease on it, and licked it.
Puts it in a bed.
Yeah. The imagery, so I mean,
It's amazing. Yeah.
it's really amazing. It's so many like food related.
Yeah,
things.
that's why I love it. I mean, of course, I would love a book where in like the first passage, there's like a whole ode to like an egg-shaped window. Remember that?
Yeah. I mean, if you live in New York, New York City, and you have a public library card, they have it on Kindle, on ebooks. Get a library card and get books for free on your Kindle,
idiots.
please. You idiots. I had some other public service announcement, but it's a bit more nihilistic than my actual ones that are useful, which is basically like the whole boycotting Amazon thing is so dumb because they literally own everything. So like you can not buy stuff from Amazon if you want, but they literally like 5% of the internet runs on Amazon servers, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. You definitely can't boycott Amazon fully. You can boycott buying products from Amazon, which will support other businesses that you buy products from, like Walgreens.
This is true.
Which is great.
Kmart. Yeah. And the other thing was, Izzy and I were looking at this up the other day, like the AWS, which is their
Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, it was Amazon, which is like all the servers and everything, does much better than like Amazon, the website. So
that's really where their money's coming from.
That's like where they have really stable income, where they're not like losing any money. And
yeah, that's a good point. I don't think people know that.
People definitely do not know that. And
people think the internet is run by not companies,
individuals. I don't know. Yeah. That would have been nice.
It was like that at some point. I mean, you can do that, but that's not the way it works.
Individual. Yeah, I mean, you could set up a server in your own house.
Yeah.
But you're not going to do that. Also, the other thing is that your adoption of Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services is basically complete when it comes to startups and stuff. So there's no way you're going to convince a startup not to use AWS. Okay, maybe only 5% of the internet is on AWS, but probably 90-something% of new products are on AWS.
Is that just because it's better?
Yeah, it is better. It's the things they offer are expansive, and they're always developing new things, and they're developing new technologies that don't exist on any other platforms. There's a few other server things, Google has servers, and I think there's something called Azure, which I think is Microsoft. But Amazon Web Services, there are whole companies that aren't Amazon that are built up around better integrating with Amazon. So it's just there's no way. It's a lost cause.
Yeah, and now we've just done a little advertisement for Amazon Web Services. Good
Yeah. But Lily's right. Take your dollars and spend them elsewhere when it comes to Amazon Marketplace. I mean, I'm not going to be one of those people, but I think it's laudable to do so.
I mean, yeah, I do that by virtue of living here mostly. But I think it's good, and I actually like the experience of going to stores. So as much as Amazon is stupid easy, it's not it's to go to a store for me because I'm able-bodied.
Shut up. Yeah, it's wait, what is it? What is the word for when you're prejudiced against handicapped people?
I don't know.
Ableist. It's ableist to tell people to boycott Amazon.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Well, no one should be telling anyone to do anything.
Yeah, true.
We have to live siphoned private lives, okay? That is the episode. Thank you for listening.
You know all the things you're supposed to do.
No, you don't.
Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at Shoes in Russia. Give us money at patreon.com/Shoes in Russia.
Please.
And sign up for our monthly image-based newsletter at shoesinrussia.com.
Thank you to all of you who support us on Patreon. Mm-hmm. We really appreciate it, and we love you. And we're going to use the money to pay a translator once we find them, and to fund various expeditions so that we can do stuff outside of Petersburg and New York.
Yup.
Yup.
All right. I'm stopping recording.
Okay, goodbye.
Oh,
So I'm always like, thanks.
you're still suckling off the teat.
Oh yeah, I suckle. Like basically every time I'm just like, every time I'm like, thanks, Jenny, and he's like, thank you, Mother Reed. I'm like, thank you, Mother Reed. That's the ritual.